All right, everyone, we start off today with something that's, it is hilarious. It's incredible as far as how big an optics fail it is. The Democrats have decided to pivot. Inflation is now rising well above the level that people are used to, number one, and have been for about 40 years, and number two, that they're comfortable with, and that's most of the population. Apparently, inflation specifically is now officially the number one issue, like in polling aggregates and stuff. It's way out ahead of anything else, so it's ahead of COVID, it's ahead of the border, it's ahead of taxes. There is no other issue that matches the current inflation. The problem for the Democrats is that inflation is reckoned to at least be a problem through the middle of next year. Some groups, including some top economists, the ones that Biden's always chanting about loving his policies, that's never actually the case when you dig deeper, but he proclaims that to be the case. More and more of them are saying, not only is this not transitory, we're not really sure when it's going to end. And it's not entirely shortage-based, by the way, but now, link in the description, archived, of course, Elizabeth Warren and the Democrats are going with a new line, which is that it's actually meatflation. Fixate solely on the price of meat. She's not coining that term. That's the term that I'm using to encapsulate the meme that is this Democratic Party claim. And the idea is that the meat packers got big profits, and that's obscene and unacceptable. We need to do more about their monopolies. So meat companies, the government response to COVID, the lockdowns, regulations, the shortage of meat inspectors, by the way, the fact that for a while there was almost no production, so now you need much more production, the fact that you've got runaway inflation causing prices to skyrocket, those aren't responsible. It's solely corporate greed. A bunch of largely Brazilian meatpacking executives got together and decided to make more money. This is similar to cyberflation. The concept that Bernie Sanders has in mind is that Amazon and some of these other companies, they're the ones that are responsible. But the thing is, when all of their smaller competitors got shut down by lockdowns, in some states, the small businesses were all shuttered, but Walmart was still on brownout mode and McDonald's was still open. If you have no local shopping ability for 90% of goods other than groceries and medical materials, because those are the only places that are open, where do you buy everything else? You get it shipped in. They're still working. They're out on the road. They don't give a shit. Maybe they got a face shield on. You can still get your video game shit. You can get your new TV that you wanted because yours broke during the lockdowns, but you couldn't get it anyway. You couldn't even get it at Walmart because only their grocery section was open. But you could buy it on Amazon and have it delivered for a small nominal fee. Amazon Prime. I don't even think there is a delivery fee. And this is why the record profits are made. Same with the meat. You have massive meat shortage. You still have ongoing shortages. The demand is high. That's by the way, not a bad thing, but the supply is much lower, so you have higher price. That boils down to more profits, and Elizabeth Warren is not functionally explaining why that's a bad thing. Now, down below, before I get any further into meatflation, which is the hilarious new Democrats meme that I suspect is not grassroots, and I suspect will fall flat. I expect that, judging based on the reaction, this is going to be laughed out of the court of public opinion. Keep in mind down below there will be a pinned comment if you're watching this video on YouTube with links to several other sites that I use to host videos. Keep in mind that I make several exclusive videos each day that are on those platforms that aren't on YouTube. By the way, this mess is catnip, so don't think that I'm turning into a slummy person or something. It's not my food. It's your food that you didn't finish. It's your cat's salad. By the way, she actually doesn't mind vegetables. Her favorite cat food has peas in it, and her other favorite has carrots in it. Kind of weird. Anyway, I suspect that meatflation should definitely be used as a counter meme to this, because anytime that you can encapsulate an idea and ridicule it in a single word or a very short term, it's always more intense. So go forth with meatflation and hash that to death cross-platform, and it'll be really funny. Make sure to, depict Warren as a meathead, which is sort of what she is. I know, she's actually wine drunk and shrunken. Doesn't really matter, though. Just distort her out of all real appearances. She'll probably look better as a result of your efforts. The idea that, and the other part that I love about this, Warren's talking about tackling monopolies, right? Two of the biggest meatpacking companies are not American, they're Brazilian. Well, Brazilian companies do not exist under U.S. law in the direct legislative fashion. You can have international agreements. You can litigate things on an international scale. You can conduct diplomacy with other countries and try to form and forge agreements at the executive level. You take the proposals back to your legislatures and hopefully hammer things out. But Elizabeth Warren and the Democrats can't pass a law affecting the price gouging. That's the other part of the meme that I'll get into, of Brazilian firms. What are you going to do about that? By the way, I would argue you're not thinking about a bunch of meatpacking companies, especially in places like Texas, that were hazarded by the lockdowns. It's something like 3 dozen companies, and that's 90% of the meatpacking or something, especially with pork down there. I can't remember the exact number, but it's inordinate. And at one point, only a couple of these companies were still operative. Only a couple of them were capable of operating, because the number of places that they could ship the meat to, because they weren't locked down, was so slim for some time last year during the height of the pandemic. What happened is that now people are returning to the materialism. The demand is higher. The shortages persist. You still have ships idling offshore. Some of those goods, by the way, by now are spoiled. You have high fuel costs. When you're transporting meat, let's say that you've got an entire truck completely with a refrigerated back completely full of meat. Thousands and thousands of pounds of meat. How much fuel do you believe that those trucks require? They're also getting now into my electric cars. We need to make 10,000 new charging stations over the next few years. Yeah, so coal-powered cars. That'll be far more efficient, whined Grandma. Every component in those cars is made by by oil and by natural gas. Virtually every component. A large share of the electricity used to manufacture comes from nuclear, and that uranium is mined in turn by vehicles that use fossil fuels. Now, the other component of this meme is price gouging. The idea is that the price is, number one, inordinate. Number two, it's being monopolistically driven up. If you want to look at monopolism, you should look to Silicon Valley. Elizabeth Warren never wants to say anything about them except that Facebook needs to censor more people and somehow this wouldn't kill its site off. There is no price gouging, though. The price is not inordinate. The meat packer has to deal with truckers. They have to pay more. Their wages definitely have gotten a bit of an increase beyond inflation because there's such a shortage of them. They have to pay more for every aspect of energy, for the manufacturing, for the shipping, logistics, everything else. They have to pay more, in some cases, to import materials. And if there's a shortage on some critical component involved in your meat packing, let's say that the meat hooks that you need, and you replace them over time, they get dull, they break, they fell on the floor, and they fell into the acid vat, actually. They fell into the pile of bones, and we just can't find these meat hooks. So I need 100 new meat hooks because I don't have enough for the assembly line where we skin animals and it's all very wonderful. I'm sure that you smell great at the end of the day there. And we're probably producing serial killers, but never mind. I need 100 meat hooks. But the meat hook ship is idling offshore. It's full of meat hooks, but they can't disembark. There's no way to get those meat hooks. Well, I have to ship it in elsewhere. Oh shit, the only place I can get it from is a place where it costs 3 times as much as from China. See, there's the other problem. We've sort of screwed ourselves, and reasonable people warned of this now for decades. Our reliance on a handful of other countries for importing purposes, and those maritime ports controlled disproportionately by a few solid blue states, that's a big problem. It's nightmarish because we've got semi-hostile foreign nations, especially China, and some that are more friendly, like Malaysia or whatever, can throttle your trade, and then blue state treasonous sellouts can throttle the importation with state of emergencies. We need a constitutional amendment, by the way, to address the ability of blue state governors to run roughshod over elements of the Constitution in the name of the sniffles. But that's an aside. Meatflation is insane. The concept that your meat is 60% more expensive and it's the corporation's fault. No, it's the fault of the government. Partially the Biden admin, although not directly. Keep in mind the lockdownerism is state level and in some cases now local. But he's encouraging it. His mandate attempts are bogging down businesses, making them hemorrhage workers, which causes the shortages to be prolonged and worse. That's the reason why. And the funny money printing. Biden's so-called stimulus, followed up now by additional inflation we'll get from the so-called infrastructure bill, and thankfully this has been punted, but at some point in the future possibly Build Back Better, which could be trillions more over the next 10 years. You are packing on an enormous increase in inflation, all of which is de facto a tax of the lower and middle classes. It affects the lower classes. It depreciates the value of the earnings that they have, and they don't have any tangible asset that keeps pace with inflation. You have to start at the upper echelon of the middle class before you have people that have enough tangible assets, like they have their house and then they have the cabin or something, to actually technically benefit from inflation. Lower and middle classes get screwed. Upper middle class breaks even. The working rich get ahead a little, and the billionaires that are the ones inflating the currency along with their banker buddies, they make out like bandits. All their properties are suddenly worth more. Then they can hopefully throttle back the currency later, and the money they made from any sales that they made, if there's a bad economic time, they'll sell you out immediately. They can roll over into foreign investments or whatever else they want to buy. Their third yacht. They love it. Now, it's not the meat packers' fault. Government screwed the meat packers for months. For months and months. Now they have to make up the difference and everything costs more. That's Biden's fault. And the blue state governor lockdownerism, which is beginning to wane. Colorado's now opened back up, but you've got significant restrictions still. New York, New Jersey, I think North Carolina, California, the upper Midwest, the entire Pacific coast, other than Alaska, which isn't continental, it doesn't really count as much. All those ports are still underwhelming insofar as their ability to operate. Newsom can say, we're going to work the ports day and night and clear this log jam. Well, I mean, there's more logs coming in all the time. You got too few workers and too many restrictions on them. It's asinine. It's not... Meatflation, the meme, is actually the inversion of reality, technically, by the Democratic Party to try to cover for Bidenomics. That's about all. Peace out.